Welcome to TradingNBI.com. This is John's reports for the 26th. We had a little bit of action yesterday where we dipped quite a ways before finally finding a recovery and building back to the upside. Pretty clean, but you can see we had a complete spider of the DOC here, meaning that bulls moved ahead, shorts completely faded out of it. We didn't see any short-term buyer return, so whether it'll have any lasting support, that's what we're going to be looking at. From a NASDAQ standpoint, we were already stronger with cyan under red, so this was always the power mode of where the market had been going previously, so that's pretty much where it maintained its strength. Looking at the euro, nothing happening. It just sideways. Now you've got the concerns with the Italian government about to collapse, and so that unknown is keeping that in check for now. And likewise, gold again is just waiting for that impetus of inflation, which hasn't happened yet. So intraday, we had some interesting setups overall. DOC spread. After the little pop we were expecting from Friday's action returned back to here because it was some serious weakness, so that it even popped up positive extremes. They filled those back in pretty quick in pre-market action, and then that left the open for what we looked at here, which is that dip below or right back to the zero, and then the orange coming down. In this particular case, we had the crossover green, and that was enough to start the turnaround. And then DOC spread early that did nothing for a while, and then magenta came in. And a little bit tougher on this one because you ended up having the power mode cross, which was the only advantage than just a break-even setup on the short configuration. And then once we had the pop up, the inversion here, where you have the break, because we were already still within that general short earlier on. It just was still looking pretty positive with the rising and relatively good power mode 2. We started to see the shakeout decline, and that finally led to this separation, which was clean enough that it could attack. It still took several more bars before the breakdown started, so anywhere along that range there was still plenty of room, and that led to a nice fill all the way back 3780 6-ish range. And this was interesting because what we ended up with was a P2 setup developing. One that happened here had no support from orange or even from green DOC. In this case, you had the crossover early that didn't hold, and so once you ended up with that P2 configuration, the full move was when you got above the 13.5 right there, and that was the beginning of the turnaround. We still ended up with some soft DOCs spreads to the short side, but they immediately saw orange turnaround. It's just one of those things, but it was that rising gold. It was starting to flatten out just at the peak of that. So when the first signal came in, you were still rising gold, and that's not a favorite in my book from what we've talked about before. And sure enough, that flipped around and led to the breakout of new highs, but those were positive extremes starting at the beginning of it, which was that 38.16. So as soon as it popped up, came right back to it on a cleaner DOC spread. But again, the turnaround took place, giving roughly break even on that setup. Then you had the nice incline from there that took us all the way back up to the highs before another DOC spread that turned out to be flat. I mean, you ended up with a move to the 50%, something I talk about when you don't have rising Fibonacci highs, from the lows. So when it gets flat like this and you're seeing consistency, here you would have thought, okay, hey, I got a better chance for pulling back. But once it stayed pretty much flat, 50% is usually what I look for. So it was kind of prescient that I had mentioned that on our Skype chat prior to, because it did exactly the expectation for that configuration. So when the orange dip came, we were still at a break-even setup, and so when the green was over, you're still pretty much at the exact same spot. And that led to the breakout going above, and then DSC spread here short right before the close. No real positive extremes, but very close with the yellows. So possible that in after hours they come fill that back in a little bit, but nothing concrete from that aspect. So quite a volatile range, well within our expectations of how much extra movement we expect from the market these days. So we're starting to see it. It's just a matter of that liquidity coming in and propping things up. Still doesn't mean you're not going to get some swift moves to the downside. And it's healthy because it clears a lot of stops and a lot of the original algo moves that pop things up. So flushes out the weak hands, keeps the strong ones going, and starts the cycle all over. And we're still all the way back up at the 38.50 range. So all good. As always, though, trade well, and I will certainly put up charts on the Skype chat.